We begin today the Gemara on the Lamed Ches Amud Aleph, 3 lines down from the top of the Yamud. So the Gemara here continues. Before it brought a discussion between the two brothers, Yehuda and Chizkiah, that were the children of Rab Chiya. So here it brings a story about the two brothers. Yehuda and Chizkiah b'nei Rab Chiya habu. Yehuda and Chizkiah were the sons of Rab Chiya, or b'nei Rab Chiya, that is, the sons of Rab Chiya. Habu Yasvi b'sudasa kamei Rabbi. They were sitting in a Suda in front of Rabbi. They were quiet, they weren't saying anything. So he said to them, give a lot of wine to drink for these young children, or if they were young. So they should say something. They should open up their mouth and speak. What happened? So they got intoxicated. And they opened up their mouths and they began to say something very extreme. They said as follows: Ein ben David ba, Mashiach is not going to come until two families of Klal Yisrael will be annihilated. Ve'elohein reish goylish beBavel, the head of the Golus of the Yidden in Bavel, v'nasi sheberetz Yisrael, and also the leader of Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. This refers to the two different houses or families that are descendants from the Melucha of David HaMelech. So only when they will disappear, that's when Mashiach will come. Shenema, because the pasuk says v'hoya mikdash, and they will be as a mikdash, referring to the family of David HaMelech. But then it says even negef u'letzur michshel l'shnei batei Yisrael. They'll be like a stone that you stumble on, and a tzur, also another expression that you stumble on. These two houses of Yidden, which refers to the two houses of the Reish HaGoyla in Bavel and the Nasi in Eretz Yisrael. And only then, Ben David Mashiach will come. Now, Rabbi was the Nasi in Eretz Yisrael, and Rabbi came from David HaMelech. So basically, the children of Rab Chiya, Yehuda and Chizkiah, are telling Rabbi that your family will be completely lost, and only then could Mashiach come. Amalahem, so Rabbi tells them, now Rabbi sort of regretted the fact that he had them drink wine. Banai, my children, you're putting thorns in my eyes. You're saying such a terrible thing that's going to happen to my family. Amalei Rab Chiya, so Rab Chiya answered and said, Rabbi, al yera beinecha, do not feel bad about this. Because Yayin nitn b'shiv moisius. Yayin is given in 70 letters, which means that the gematria of Yayin is 70. And v'soid nitn b'shiv moisius. And the word soid is also the same gematria of 70. And therefore, nichnas Yayin, yatsa soid. The wine, they drank wine, so therefore now the secret comes out. So you learn the simple pshat of the Gemara. It sounds like what Rab Chiya was telling Rabbi is, don't worry, they didn't say this to offend you. Don't get hurt by it. It's because they drank wine, so the side comes out. But soft, they're saying something so terrible like this. What's the side over here? What's the secret? What's this special thing that they said here? The Marsha has a big arichis about this, based on the idea that the Yidden are compared to the Levana, which wanes and waxes, and that before there's a birth, there's a disappearance of the moon. The same thing also with Klal Yisrael B'chlal, there's the Yeridis and Aliyas, and the same thing also with Mashiach himself, that only when the Malchus Beis David is going to be completely disappeared or wiped out, both in Eretz Yisrael and in Bavel, there's a big Yerida and a disappearance. It's dafke then that Mashiach comes. So this is a big side about understanding how the birth of Mashiach comes about. That's really what they were speaking about. That's a big arichas here in the Marsha.
This Rabbi Yehuda is the Rabbi Nasi.
Yeah, we're talking about Rabbi Yehuda Nasi.
Was he direct descendant of the Shlomo HaMelech, the lineage? Because David HaMelech had 17 children.
Correct.
It's a vast family.
I could be, I'm not sure. It says the details here, when they get to the Reish HaGoyla and when they get to Rabbi in Eretz Yisrael, they weren't descendants from the same children of David HaMelech. Amar Rav Chisda said, Amar Mar Ukve, Amar La Amar Rav Chisda, Dorash Mori Barmar. Ma'idach Siv, what's the pshat in the pasuk where it says, Vayishkay Hashem al hara, David was diligent on regarding the bad, Vayevia aleinu, and he brought the terrible things upon us, Ki tzadek Hashem alekeinu, because Hashem is righteous. So how do we understand this pasuk? Mishom, the tzadek Hashem, because Hashem is righteous, Vayishkay Hashem al hara, that's why Hashem is diligent on bringing terrible things on us, Vayevia aleinu. So the Gemara says, because tzedakah HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael, this is a righteousness of the Eibusher that he did for Yidden, shehiktim galus tzidkiyo, that the Eibusher brought the galus of tzidkiyo to be earlier than 2 years or earlier than it should have been. Why did the Eibusher bring the Golus of Tzidkiyahu to bring earlier than it should have been? As the Gemara here will explain. Because when the Yidden went into Golus in the time by the Churban, the first Beis HaMikdash, they went into Golus in 2 phases. And in order for the second phase of Yidden that went into Golus should meet the ones that were there in the first phase, so he wanted them to go into Golus earlier. And v'oid Golus Yechanya Kayemes, the Golus, the earlier stage of the Golus, which was the Yidden that came with Yechanya into Golus, they were still alive. Now regarding the first phase of Yidden that went into Golus, so there it says Achorash v'hamasger elef. Simple translation of this is the craftsmen and the doorsmen or the gatesmen. There were 1,000 of them that went into Golus. So the Gemara darshans, what is this talking about? What's unique about craftsmen and gatesmen? Chorash means it refers to great Talmidei Chachamim. That's who was in the Golus in the first phase when Yidden went into Golus. Kivish Peischen. When they open up their mouth to say Torah, everybody else becomes like a deaf mute. Nobody can speak in front of them. Maskir means once they close a matter of halacha, meaning if they say about a certain subject in halacha that they can't understand it, nobody else will be able to explain it. So these were the great Talmidei Chachamim that came down to Golus Bavel and the Golus of Yechanya. And the Kama how much were they? Elef. Or 1,000 of these great Talmidei Chachamim in Bavel. So now the point was, if the Golus of the second Golus of Yidden, the second wave with Tzidkiyahu would have came down too late, then they would have missed the Talmidei Chachamim that were there before, and then the Torah would have gotten lost. Like this, they met the ones that were there in the first wave of the Golus, and they were able to teach them the Torah, so the Torah should continue even when Yidden were on Golus. So the fact that Eibusher was makdim Golus, vayishked Hashem, that's actually the righteousness of Hashem. So Yidden should have Torah and Golus.
Is this a Morim or?
Again? No, much before. We're talking about much earlier. We're talking about between the first and second Beis HaMikdash. The Churban of the first Beis HaMikdash. Ola Amar, Ola says, Shehiktim Shtei Shanim, that Hashem brought the Galus, the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash 2 years. Livnei Shantem. 2 years before the time when it's hinted in the word V'nei Shantem, the Galus should have happened. The word V'nei Shantem, the gematria of the word V'nei Shantem is 852. Which means that the time when the Yidden should have gone into Golus should have been 852 years after they came into Eretz Yisrael. But instead, the Eibusher brought them into Golus 2 years earlier, in order that the continuation of the pasuk in the V'nei Shantem should not be fulfilled. Because in the pasuk it says that V'nei Shantem, and then it goes on to say that the Eibusher will then Ki Ovet Tevedon, the Yidden will all be completely destroyed. If they would have gone into Golus, like the pasuk describes it, 852 years after they came into Eretz Yisrael, then that would have happened. So therefore the Eibusher was makdim the Golus 2 years, and then the continuation of the pasuk did not come to be. It wasn't materialized. So Rashi here makes the cheshbon. Rashi says that the first Beis HaMikdash was built 400 and, how much is it? 450 years, I think it is, after Yetzias Mitzrayim. Just a second, Rashi says the Golus, the cheshbon over here. Abba Meis Shana. The Beis HaMikdash itself stood how long? 410 years. Then the Golus, from Mitzrayim, from Yetzias Mitzrayim until they came into Eretz Yisrael was how many years? No, it was, I think, 450 years. So together, what? Yeah. No. So what's the cheshbon?
400 years the first Beis HaMikdash.
410 years the first Beis HaMikdash stood, and from Mitzrayim until they built the first Beis HaMikdash was how many years?
No, it was higher.
480.
Number, yeah.
480, and then the Beis HaMikdash itself stood 410. Right. Okay. Now, so you have to take off 40 years, because 40 years the Yidden were still in the Midbar. Right. So if you take off 40 years, so then it comes out that the Yidden were in Eretz Yisrael for 850 years. Instead of 852, right? It should have been 852 because of the gematria of V'nei Shantem, but instead, the Yidden were in Eretz Yisrael only 850. So that's the 2 years before that Eibusher destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. Amar Rab Chiya bar Yaakov said, Shma Mina. From here we can learn out that Meheira, the Marei Alma, when it says by the Eibusher Meheira, immediately, quickly, Tmani Meya v'chamshin tartahave. How long is the Eibusher's Meheira? 852 years, because it says here in the pasuk, V'nei Shantem, and the Eibishter says Meheira, that it'll immediately destroy you. Ki ovet tevedem mahir. Actually, here brings the pasuk. So what's mahir? After 852 years, it's called mahir. So you see by the Eibishter, mahir is 852 years. Okay, so the Mashal says over here, based on this, that even though we're in Galus for such a long time, but by the Eibishter, all this time is mahir. It's all very quickly. So therefore, you should not give up hope for Mashiach coming. And even this Gufa, it's all speaking about a level of Lakus, which is already shaykh to the Metzias of Zman. We're not talking about the level where there's no concept of Zman at all. That's why when we speak about Mashiach coming right away, the lashon that's always added is that he should come ba'gola didan. Not only b'meheira, it should be b'meheira v'yameinu ba'gola didan, according to our definition of time. Not in the Eibishter's definition of time, 852 years is called meheira. And even this is, even 2,000 years is also meheira. It's not only 852, it's more as well. Okay, going back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that when you speak to the Eidim that are testifying about capital punishment, so you intimidate them and you talk to them about what it means to take away a life of a Yid, and you speak about the fact that the human being, Adam Rishon, was created alone, and therefore every Yid is a Eilam Malay, and so on. So the Gemara brings Tana Rabbana, we learned in Abraisa, Adam Yichidi Nivra. The human being was created alone. So that the heretics shouldn't say, Har b'rishuyis b'shamayim. There are many authorities in heaven, and therefore the two human beings created are created chas v'shalom by different authorities in heaven. Davar another reason, mipnei tzadikim and mipnei rishaim. It's both for tzadikim and for rishaim. Shelo yiyu tzadikim oimrim, so that tzadikim shouldn't say, Anu b'nei tzadik. We are the descendants of a tzaddik because we come from that human being that he was a tzaddik, and therefore we're perfect. And we don't have to be careful to be worried that we could ever do an aveda because we come from the perfect man. Or Rishayim, on the other hand, the Rishayim will excuse themselves and say, Ana b'nei Rasha. We are the descendants of the other human being, which is a Rasha. And therefore, it's not going to help us to try to do tshuva, to try to be righteous. It's impossible, because we come from the other human being, which is a Rasha. So therefore, the Eibush created Adam Rishon, one man, and from him everyone comes, so you can't have these excuses. Another reason. It's for families. So families shouldn't quarrel with one another and say, I come from this human being, you come from that human being, I'm superior, you're inferior. Now, if now, that Adam Rishon is created alone, Mizgadais, people have these arguments with one another who's more superior than someone else. So, Nivru Shnayim, if the human being would be created too, Allah has kama v'kama, most definitely there would be room for this kind of division of different levels of class of a human being's existence. It's because of the Gazlanin and Chamsanin, people that are stealing or extorting from someone a piece of land. So if you have two different lineages from Adam and Rishon, two human beings that are created, so you come and say, this property really belonged to from where I descend from. It doesn't belong to you. So if now, Adam and Rishon is created alone, people steal and extort. Nivru Shnayim, if the human being would be created too, Allah has kama v'kama, most definitely you would say that this part of the world belongs to me, where I descend from, it doesn't belong to you. Going on, what it said in the Mishnah, the fact that Adam Rishon was created alone, and then you have all human beings that have all different facial features and look different. They all come from the same Adam Rishon. This is the greatness of the Eibishter. Tana Rabbanon, so we learned about this. The greatness of Hashem. The person is minting many coins from one minting. So they're all the same. They have all the same shape and size and so on. Hashem mints all people with the same minting, the same chaysim, the same seal. But everyone has different facial features. Everyone is different. So you have many that come from one. That shows to what extent Hashem is undefined and unlimited. That's really what it's all about. Sheneva, the source of this is the pasuk where it says, "Tishapech kachaymer chaysam." That a human being, when he dies, so his chaysam, his features, his existence, turns into a chaymer, just into a piece of clay which has no features, no shape. And then and then by Tchias HaMesim, they get up again with the garment of their body. So here we see that a person has a chaysam, that he comes from that one seal that Hashem created by Adam Rishon, and then every person is different. Now, what's the reason for this? Why is the appearance of one person not similar to the other? Because so a person shouldn't see a beautiful home and a beautiful woman, and then he'll say, this is mine. Because if everyone is the same, so then he could come and say that this belongs to me. And no one could deny what he's saying because you can't recognize the difference between one and another. Even though the character of a person will be different, but the appearance is going to be the same. So in that sense, you can come and claim that this woman is mine. Hashem took away from the wicked their appearance, and this breaks the strong arm of these Rishayim. Because Hashem took away that appearance, that they shouldn't all look the same, that's what breaks their ability to come and take another woman that's not theirs. Tanya, and a Brisa we learned, Rab Meir said about this, there are three things about what's unique about a person that's different from his friend. B'koyel, voice, b'maren, his appearance, the facial features and so on, or b'das, and his understanding of things. So what's the reason for this? B'koyel b'mare, the reason why the voice and the appearance is different, mishum erva, for the relationship with a man and his wife. The wife has to be able to recognize her husband, and the husband has to be able to recognize his wife. And it's not enough that it should be a difference in the appearance, because that's good for by day. And for by night, when you can't see, you also need a difference in the voice, so they can recognize one another. Obedas, and then the difference in a person's perception and understanding of things, for people that steal. Because if everybody thinks the same about things, so then you could much easier steal from someone, because you understand how he's thinking about things, where he hid his things, and so on. So in order for people to be able to be individual and protective from what belongs to them, everyone has to have their own perception of things. In a Brisa we learned, Adam Nivra Be'erev Shabbos, the human being was created on Friday. Why? So that the heretics shouldn't say, if Adam Rishon is created on the first day, then they would say that the human being has power and he has a partnership in the Eibishter creation. If the human being, if a person becomes arrogant, the Eibishter tells him, look, even a fly, a mosquito, exists and was created before you b'maisa bereshis in creation. This is the Alter Rebbe brings this in Tanya. The Alter Rebbe says that why does it say dafke yitush? Because the yitush is machnas ve'ena moitzi. So amongst all creatures, it's the lowest level. It only takes in and it doesn't give. Everything that exists could give out, but not the yitush. And the Eibishter says to Adam Rishon that even, or any person that's arrogant, even the yitush comes before him. Another thing the Alter Rebbe adds to what it says here in the Gemara, but Pashtus, it refers to a person that's doing Avedis. The Alter Rebbe says it's not only a person that's doing Avedis. Even a person that has a machshava, that even has a taiva to do an Aveda, already yitush kadmach. Why? Because by all animals, by all other creatures in the world, they don't even have the ability to do anything against Hashem. The way the Eibishter created them with their teva, they remain in that's how they exist. If a human being even has a taiva, an interest to do something chas v'shalom against Hashem, even on that already it says yitush kadmach. Tazuach daitayel, not just when you do an Aveda b'payel. Another pshat, Kadesh Yikanas la mitzvah miyad. He's created on Friday so you could enter into the mitzvah of Shabbos immediately. Another pshat, Kadesh Yikanas la suda miyad. So he could enter into the world, which is like a prepared meal for him, everything right away. This shouldn't have to wait. Everything is prepared and created before him. The analogy of a king of flesh and blood. Shabbat Palterin, he built a palace with Shichlan and prepared everything. With Hiskin Sud, and he prepares a festive meal. And then he brings in the guest. Sheneman, learn this from the pasuk. It says, "Chachma is bansa beisa." Wisdom builds the home. Chatzva amudei shiva. And you carve out 7 pillars. Tovcha tifcha, and you slaughter and you prepare everything that's needed. Masecha yena, and you pour the wine. Af archa shulchan, and you prepare the table. And then shulchan ariseh, you send your maidens tikra to go and invite all the guests. Al gape mirei mekares, on top of the on a high place on top of a wall. You announce to invite all people to come to join. So the Gemara teaches the details of this pasuk as it relates to creation. Chachmas bansa beisa, when it says the world is created with the wisdom, zum midase shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is the midah of chachma of Hashem. Shabaras kalelim kula b'chachma. Hashem created the world with His wisdom. When it says chatzva amudei shiva, elu shiva simei bereishis, Hashem created the world in 7 days. Even though Hashem created the world only in 6 days, so Taisus here brings the medrash that says that ma hayalim chasim menucha shaba Shabbos ba menucha. So even though there was no act of creation, but the menucha is the shleimus of creation. Therefore, Shabbos is included in that. Then tovcha tifcha mesecha yena afarcha shulchana. You prepare all the food and the wine and the table. What does this refer to in the world? Elu yamim and haaretz v'chol tzarchei olam. This refers to the seas, to the rivers, and everything else that's necessary to live in the world. And then, after everything's prepared, Shalchan Arisel Tikra, Hashem sends His maidens to call Ze Adam v'Chava. Hashem calls Adam v'Chava and brings them into the world and creates them. Now, Al Gape Mirai Mekares, top of a high place. So Rabbi Bar Bachana Rami, Rabbi Bar Bachana asked about this. Ksiv agape, over here it says on a very high place Hashem has to go and invite them, because meaning that they're on a high level, so Hashem has to bring them into the world. But Ksiv al kisei, then in another pasuk it says al kisei, which means on a throne, which means that in order to invite them, you have to speak to them and invite them on a lower level, only on a throne, not so high up on a agape meroime. And says the Gemara, Betchila al agape, first Adam Rishon was very high, before Chet Eitzadas, or L'B'Seif al Kisei, and then later on he was lowered down to be only on a throne, which is much lower down. Now here the Gemara goes on to speak about Adam Rishon and Chet Eitzadas. Mi Pesi Yaser Heina Chasar Leiv. Who is a fool that goes away here, the one that's lacking a heart? Amrulei, that is part of the pasuk. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter says, Mi Pisoi Lizeh, who persuaded man to do the Aveda? Isha Amrulei. It's the woman that said this to him, and she's the fool that brought him to do this Aveda. The Chsev, the pasuk says, Nayef Isha Chasar Leiv, that the woman that he's naive, that he has a relation with, is chasar leiv. She doesn't have the heart, and therefore she brought him to do the aveda. That's not the simple pshat of the pasuk. The simple pshat of the pasuk is talking about the man. He's the naive. He's the one that has this forbidden relationship with the woman. Why? Because the man is the chasar leiv. But the Gemara's darshan is on the woman, on Chava, that brought Adam Rishon to eat from the Eitz Hadas. Tanya Hayir Rab Meir Aimer. Rab Meir said about the creation of Adam Rishon. Adam Rishon Mikol Kulei Hutzpa Afare. Adam Rishon, when Hashem formed the body of Adam Rishon from the earth, Hashem gathered the earth from the entire world. Shanema Golmi Ro Einecha. Hashem shaped the Golim, the body of Adam Rishon in earth. Ro Einecha. Hashem saw from wherever Hashem sees earth, He gathered from there. Oksiv Ki Hashem Einav Sheites B'Chol Haaretz. Hashem's eyes are all over the entire world, and from all over the world, Hashem gathered the earth to form the body of Adam Rishon from the Afar. So there's more details about this. So he said in the name of Rav, Adam Rishon Gufay. So Adam Rishon, his body, Mi Bavel. So his body is from Bavel, which is a very low place, because Hashem took out the earth from there to create Adam Rishon. We'll soon see how large and how tall Adam Rishon is. You need a lot of earth to form the body of Adam Rishon. So he took out from Bavel. Now, and Veroshai, his head is Meretz Yisrael. That comes from Meretz Yisrael, the highest, the most chashuv place. Ve'ivarav, and the other limbs of his body, Mishara Ratzes, from the other lands in the world. From Shara Ratzes. And now, Gvaisav, the bottom of Adam Rishon, Amarav Acha Me'akra da Agma. It's from a very deep place, low down in Bavel itself, a very low place. That's the lowest part of the human being. That's how Hashem gathered the earth from different places in the world to create the different parts in the body of Adam Rishon. Rabbi Yochanan Bar Chanina said, the day has 12 hours in it. So here, regarding the day that Adam Rishon was created, this is what happened in the creation of Adam Rishon. Shah Rishayna, the first hour of the day, Hutz Parafare. Hashem gathered the earth from the whole world to form him. Shniya Nasa Gailim. The third day, the second hour of the day, Hashem is shaping his body into that shape. Shlishi is Nimtchoy Vadav. The third hour of the day, Hashem stretches out all the limbs of his body. Revies, on the fourth hour, Nizrika by Neshama. Vayipach Bapav, Hashem blows the Neshama and gives life to Adam Rishon. Chamishis, the fifth hour of the day, Amad al Raglov. He stood up on his feet. Shishis, on the sixth hour of the day, Kara Shemus, that's when he gave the names for all the different creations in the world, as it says in the pasuk that the Adam is the one that gave the names for everything, which is a great thing, the Chachma of Adam Rishon. Shvius, on the seventh hour of the day, Nizdavdale Chava, Hashem separated Adam and Chava and gave him a wife, Chava. Shminis, Ol Lemita Shnayim, V'Yardu Arba. In the eighth hour of the day, they went into the bed as two, and then she gave birth already then, in that hour, right away, and they came down as four. So Tosfos here says that this refers to the birth of Cain and his twin, not Hevel. Hevel was born later, but this is the birth of Cain and his twin, so they were four now. She is on the ninth hour of the day, that's when he was commanded not to eat from the Eitz Hadas. Asiris, on the 10th hour of the day, Sarach, he spoiled and he sinned. So the whole thing was 1 hour that he had the mitzvah and he didn't keep it. Achas Esre, on the 11th hour of the day, Nidden, that's when he was judged and punished. And Shteim Esre Nitred V'holachloi, on the 12th hour of the day, he was already expelled from Gan Eden and he left. Shenamar, this is what it means in the pasuk where it says, Adam biyakar, Adam Erishin, in his glory, in his great glory that he had when he was created, and he was in Gan Eden, Bal Yolam, but he didn't sleep there overnight. In the same day that he was there, he was already expelled from Gan Eden. Amar Rami Bar Chomer said, "En chay ra sheletas ba'adam." Wild beast cannot have any power over a person, elam ken nidmula kebehema, unless a person loses his image of Hashem that's in him. He's like compared to an animal. Shenema nimshal kebehema is nidbu. When a person is compared to an animal, then it says here. I think the Mashal says it says nimshal and nidmu. They both mean the same thing, compared. But the pasuk switches the expression that if kebehem is nidmu, if you compare it to a behemah, then nimshal, which means also a lashon of shlita. Then the wild beast can have a control over a person. Shah b'seifa Rami Simin for the next things that the Gemara is going to speak here about Adam Erishin. Amar Rav Yudah Amar Rav b'shah shabika shekadosh baruch hu l'baris es Adam. When Hashem wanted to create a human being, so barakat achas shel malachi hasharis. Hashem creates a group of malachim. And he says to them, is it your desire to join me and let's create a man in the image of Hashem? So they said to Hashem, what is the actions of this person? And Hashem said what the actions of a human being is in the life of a person, the Yitzhahara that he has and all the bad things that a person has. So so they said to the Master of the universe, what's the point of creating? What's to remember and to have an existence of man? Hashem stuck out his little finger between them and burnt them. In other words, it was a level of godly revelation that was too much for them to handle, and they became completely nullified. The same happened with the second group and the third group. So then the Kachlishis, they said in front of Chen Kachnia, the second group, and then Kachlishis, when it came to the third group, so now Amru Lefanov, they said to the Eibishter, the previous groups that said to you not to create man, ma'a'ilu, what did their opinion help? The entire world belongs to you. Whatever it is that you desire to do, you should do. And that's it. You should create the Adam. You create the person. You don't need our advice. So then the Eibusha creates Adam Erishin, creates the people. And then once it came to the generation of the Dera Mabel and the generation of the Dera Floge, so Shemaseyim Kolim and their deeds in this world were very bad. Amru Lufana, now the Malachim turned back to Hashem and said, the Master of the universe, the first group of Malachim that advised you not to create man, weren't they right? Didn't they say the truth? Amar Lahen, so Hashem tells them, Vatzikna anihu, until old age I am it, I am the same. Vatseva ani espo v'gayman, even in the very old age I can tolerate. So the Eibishter did not take back what he did to create a human being. So this piece of Gemara, as the entire Agadah to here, is all has to be understood on a different level. Even here in the Gemara, there's this Ois Gimel, at least in this Gemara, in Agaz Vitzirim, it says here, Haggadas Elu Yeshlem Soid Lemevinim. Okay, the secrets of our understanding of how the Eibusha creates Adam Erishin. In Chassidus, it talks about the saying. There's the Medrash that speaks about the fact that the Eibusha consulted with the Malachim. Chesed said that the person should be created because he's going to do Chesed. Emes said that a person should not be created because the person is not going to be Emes. And in the end, the Eibusha creates the person in this world. There's a Sikha from the Rebbe in connection actually to Chav Dal Tevis, the Yartzeit of Dal Rebbe, which is tomorrow, where the Alter Rebbe wrote the last Igeres. He wrote right before he passed away. Nefesh Hashvela. He speaks about this Gemara, how low a person is in this world, and nevertheless Hashem says, "I'm going to create man." Meaning, there's different levels here. On the level of Malachim, on the level of MS. So on one level of MS, the human being in the world does not express the truth of the Eibishter. But then there's a deeper level which comes from Chesed over here, when the Eibishter says that the unlimited level of the Eibishter, that Adarabah, that truth of the Eibishter is expressed here in the Aveda of a Yid and the human being here in the world. It's different levels. On a higher level, over here, the person in the world is expressing the real truth of Hashem, even in such a low place. That's the general point behind what the Gemara is saying here. Sagt die Gemara weiter, Amar Rav Yudah Amar Rav. Adam Erishin, Misai fa'olam v'atzaifai. Hashem created Adam Erishin and he formed his body. As we saw, he gathered the earth from all over the world. How large and how tall was he? From one end of the world to the other. Meaning that around the whole world were his if you put him in the whole world, where his feet are ending, and where his feet are, that's where his head is. It's all world. Okay, what's the source for this? The pasuk says, Hashem creates the man on the earth here below. So the Gemara dashes from one end of the world, one katzeh, one end to the other end. Once he sinned, Hashem placed his palm on him, his hand on him, and minimized him. And the height of Adam Rishon after Chetei Tzadas was only 100 amas tall. Adam Rishon is created Achav v'Kedem, which is the Zachar and the Keva together, and then it says Vatoshas alai kapecha. Hashem placed his palm on Adam Rishon and minimized his height. Rabbi Lazar said, Adam Rishon min haaretz ad l'Rekiya haya. The height of Adam Rishon was from the earth here below all the way up to the Kiyah. Shenema he dashes the possibly brought before different. Liminayema shabar lekim Adam ala haaretz. He created him here on Aretz. Ulumiktzeh Hashemayim, and his height is all the way to Hashemayim. At Kitzei Hashemayim, he doesn't dash there. He dashes from Aretz to Kitzei Hashemayim. Once he sinned, and he minimized his height. So the Gemara asks, Kasha Kraya Dodi. These two interpretations in the same pasuk, so it's a contradiction. Do you darshan ala Aretz to Lemiktzei Hashemayim, or do you darshan Lemiktzei Hashemayim at Kitzei Hashemayim, which means that his height is the entire world? Says the Gemara, both of these heights of Adam Rishon is the same. The entire world and from Aretz to the Kiyah is the same height. The Yad Ramayah, he says that it's not exactly the same height, it's a guzma, but the Gemara is saying that it looks the same, it's comparing, but it's really not the same height. Adam Rishon spoke in Aramaic, Shanama, because the pasuk says, "V'li ma yakru reyecha kel." And for me, ma yakru means how heavy, how hard it is to understand. Reyecha, your ideas, Hashem. So yakru in Aramaic, heavy, kaved is in Hebrew, and yakru is in Aramaic. And reyecha in Lashon Kodesh it's machshava, that he can't understand Hashem's thoughts. And in Aramaic, reyecha is rayon, the thoughts of Hashem he can't understand. It's the pasuk that says that this is the sefer of the Toilus of man. Malame, what does this mean? Malame Hashem showed Adam Rishon all the generations and ones that are going to expound on Torah, and all the generations and the wisdom of the Torah they're going to learn. When he came and he saw the Torah that Rabbi Akiva is going to teach, he was happy to see the great level of Torah that he taught Torah. But then he became very sad when he saw the cruel death that he was killed. And that's when he said the pasuk quoted before, V'li ma yakru reyecha kel. And for me, how difficult, how heavy, and how hard it is to understand Hashem's thoughts. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, Adam Rishon min hoya. Adam Rishon was a heretic. Shenema v'yikra Hashem elakim ela Adam v'yem ela Hayaka. Hashem calls Adam and he says to him Hayaka. What does that mean? On nata lipcha. Where is your heart tilting towards? Meaning that's going towards Avodah Zarah. Rabbi Yitzchak Amar Moshech bar lasai haya. That he pulled the foreskin to cover over the bris milah. Because Ksiv here it says Vehema ka'adam avru bris, that they are like man that are taking away their bris. Ksiv hasam as brisi hefer. As brisi hefer refers to a person that is moishchar lasai, that he's being mevatel as bris milah. So therefore, the pasuk before that says about Adam Rishon means that he was moishchar lasai. Rav Nachman Amar kaifer bekeraya. He denied the ikr, the truth of Hashem. Because Ksiv Vacha Avru Bris, Ksiv Hasam as Brisi Hefer, and the Amr al Asha Azvu as Bris Hashem, they leave the covenant of Hashem, they leave Hashem. So this was Adam Rishon as well. So what does this mean over here? I remember the Mashal, one of the Mefarshim asked on the Gemara, how could you say this about Adam Rishon? So they say that what it says here in the Gemara, this is not the Gemara saying this, that this is what Chazal say about Adam Rishon. As we'll see soon, the Gemara here is going to talk about what Apikarsim say about Psukim and Torah and how you could refute their interpretation of Torah. The Gemara here is bringing that this is how Apikorsim can understand what it says about Adam Rishon, that he was a min, that he was a Ovid Avodah Zarah, and so on. But if I remember correctly, it says the Pshat Nechsidus about this, that Adam Rishon is the one that's really the source. Chetei Tzadas was the source of all other Avedas that came out, Avodah Zarah, Moshechar Lasai, and everything else. It all begins in that subtle Aveda of Chetei Tzadas. Even though on the level of Chetei Tzadas, it's not at all any of these things that are mentioned here about Adam Rishon, but Sof, because it's nostalgia from this, the Avedas that come out, even Avodah Zarah, from Chetei Tzadas, so therefore this is being said about Adam Rishon. Huh?
It's not because of Tanoim saying.
And a Chanavi, okay, but the Army Farshim that say that this is all a Hagdama to the next piece of Gemara that speaks about the way up a Korsim, Taisha, Psukim. Tanan Asal, we learned there. Rabbi Lazai have a shakad lil mit Torah. You should be diligent in learning Torah. V'dam ashatashav la apikaitis. You'll know how to answer a heretic. Amar Rabbi Yechanan lo yishanu ela apikaitis of the kechavim. This is to answer a guy that's a heretic. Aval apikaitis Yisrael. A yid that's an apikaitis. Don't bother in debating him and answering him because kolshken de pakatfei. Because then he's only going to think deeper into these psukim and he's going to become even more of an apikaitis. He'll become even more hefker, more wild. Amar Rabbi Yechanan said. In any place in the psukim of Torah that the minim translated them in a way of hefker, in a way that's not true, the answer to their question and the way they translated Torah is right there. And the Gemara brings a few examples for this. One pasuk it says, Nas Adam B'Tzalmeinu. So it uses a plural term regarding creation of man. So it sounds like that there's chas v'shalom two authorities. But then the pasuk says, Vayivra Elokim es Adam B'Tzalmei. And Hashem created man in his image. So it says a singular term. Another pasuk it says, Hava nerdav v'navla sham sfasam. By the Dora Flagel, let's go down. It uses a plural term, let's go down and then mix up. And when Hashem, they made it, they can't communicate with one another. But then it says a singular term, Vayedet Hashem liris ha'seir v'samigdal. Hashem himself came down. When it says the pasuk, the plural term, Kisham niglu elav alakim, they were revealed. It's used as a plural term, and then it says right there, Lakeil ha'oina yisi b'yom tzarasi. Hashem that answers me in the day of my trouble. So it says a singular term. Another pasuk it says, Kimi gadla shaloi alakim kroivim elav. Kashem Elokeinu. So over here it uses also the plural term. So right afterwards it says Kashem Elokeinu b'chol kareinu elav. So it uses a singular term. Umi ka'amcha Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz asher holcho alakim liftes leila'am. So who is like the Yidden over here in the world? Asher holcho alakim uses over here. It uses a plural term. Holcho alakim liftes leila'am. So this plural term is so it's not a question. Why? Because in the pasuk before that the Gemara quoted, it says a singular term. It goes together. I think these two psukim. What? These two psukim go together over here. What? Kimi goy gadol. Kimi goy gadol is actually a pasuk that's in Vaschanon. Kimi goy gadol. Ashalai lekim kravim elav. Kashem lekim v'chol karenu elav. So over here it says a singular term, and then in the other pasuk it says mikam chisrak be'achad baratz ashal chol lekim. So, So.
Kashem lekim is the answer.
Second. Right.
But then afterwards, the next example, Mikam Yisrael.
Mikam Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz asher holcho lekim liftes leila'am. So that's plural, right? Holcho is plural.
Right, and
liftes loy. Liftes loy la'am. The liftes loy is singular, right? So the same thing also in the previous pasuk. It says miga gadla shaloy lekim kroivim, and then it says elov. Elov is a singular term over here as well. It says holchu first, and then it says loy la'am, which is singular. One more pasuk the Gemara brings, Adi Karsavun Ramav, that there are thrones. Karsavun is thrones in plural. Ramav are placed for Hashem. But then it says Va'atik Yaimin Yosef, that Atik Yaimin Hashem, which is Atik Yaimin, is in old days. Yosef, he sits and he uses a singular term. Okay, so now the Gemara explains, if that's the case, so then why in all these psukim does it use all of this plural terms? So hanach lamali, why do we have all these psukim using these kind of terms? Says the Gemara K'di Rabbi Yechanan. The Rabbi Yechanan said, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu oiseh davar, elam ken nimlach b'pamal yishal ma'ila. Hashem does not do anything unless he first consults with the malachim in heaven for whatever he does. This is the way Hashem creates the world. It comes down, the levushim, and with the malachim, the hashpa, and say the shtalshalos, all the levels. That's therefore uses the plural term. It's the level of a lakos that relates to a metzias of a world, and that's why these terms can be used. Shenema, as it says, b'gzeiras idin pisgama or b'mayim kadishim. She'ilta, the Eibishter with his decree, with his words that he says, but She'ilta, the Eibishter consults the levels of the malachim to create the world. So the Gemara says, Hat teinach kuli. This is an answer for all the plural terms that are used here. But the last pasuk that was quoted, Adi Karsvan Ramav Ma'ikal Meima. This pasuk where it says the plural term of the thrones that are prepared for Hashem, why does it use that plural term? So the Gemara gives a few pshatim. One pshat is Echad Loi ve'Echad Lo David. One throne is for Hashem, and one throne is for David HaMelech. The Tanya, as we learned in the Braisa, Echad Loi ve'Echad Lo David. One throne for Hashem, and one throne for David HaMelech. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. That's Rabbi Akiva's interpretation. Amalei Rabbi Yosi said to him, Akiva, ad masai at oiseh shchina chayil. Until when are you going to consider the Shekhinah to be like mundane? That there's one throne for Hashem and one throne for David? Ella, rather, what are the two thrones? Echad l'din, one for judgment, v'echad l'tzedakah, and one for righteousness. Now, Kibla Mina, I like Kibla Mina. The Gemara wants to know whether Rabbi Akiva accepted the question of Rabbi Yossi on his pshat, and he accepted his pshat or not. Rabbi Akiva accepted his pshat because Rabbi Akiva said the same thing, that one is for judgment and one is for righteousness. Amalei Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Akiva malacha eitzel hagodah. Rabbi Akiva here sort of made this mistake, or he had this original interpretation of in the Pasuk. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said to Rabbi Akiva, "Why are you expounding things in the Haggadah and explaining these psukim here? Klach eitzel legoim v'ahalis. You should go and be occupied in learning Torah and the halachas, and even the most difficult halachas of Torah and the goim and halis." Ella, so what's really the pshat over here? He says a third pshat, not like what Rabbi Akiva originally said, not like what Rabbi Yossi said either. Ella echad lekisei v'echad l'shrafraf, which is kisei leishaval, of a throne to sit on, and shafraf is lahadoim raglov, for the feet, to place your feet as a footstool. Right, so this all refers to the levels of Holocaust, the way Hashem comes down here into the world. Kisei is when you come down, you sit, and then the feet is also further. It's all different in Yanim of Hashem coming down into the world. Tzimtzumim and Hiridis, Hashem, whatever, and so on. Amar Rav Nachman said, Haiman di Yodi, la duri min leminim kirav idis. Someone that could answer heretics like Rav Idis knew how to answer them, lahader. So then you should debate them or you could answer them. But v'loi loy lahader. If not, don't bother with them, don't answer them. Amar ahu min Rav Idis. There's a heretic that said to Rav Idis in the Pasuk in Torah Ksiv. It says, Val Moshe Omar alei el Hashem. And to Moshe, Hashem says, go up to Hashem. So why does it say alei el Hashem? The pasuk begins, it's Hashem himself speaking. It should have said alei elai miboy elei. Should have said go up to me. So from this they wanted to prove, you see in the pasuk in the Torah that it's two authorities above. So Amalei, so Rav Idis answered him, Zeu matatrin, sheshmoi kishem rabbi, that this refers to Malach Matat, that his name is like the name of his master of Hashem. D'chsev kishmi bekir, by my name is within him. So according to Rashi, the pshat over here in the Gemara is Moshe Omar, who's speaking to Moshe. Malach Matat is speaking to Moshe and saying, go up to Hashem. The Ramban al Torah actually says it's the opposite, that it's Hashem saying Alei el Hashem, and Alei el Hashem is two Malach Matat, which has the name of Hashem in it. So he said, so if so, we should serve him. If he has the name of Hashem in him, so then we should serve him. So it says in the pasuk, Al Tamer boy, do not exchange me. Al Tamireni boy, don't exchange serving me for Malach Matat. Im Kain. So now, if so, based on what the pasuk goes on to say, Lo Yisal lePeshachem, Malach Matat cannot forgive your sins. So there's no reason you should be serving him. So Lamali, why does he exist? What's the point of Malach Matat in this world? Amalei Heminusa. Biyadon da Philip Parvanke Namile Kablino, that Hemnusa Biyadon, which means that how do they touch to Hemnusa Biyadon? It's we have the belief in our hand is that Philip Parvanke Namile Kablina, even as a shliach. Even as a parvanke means a messenger, even as a messenger of Hashem, to go in front of Yidden, the Yidden didn't accept him either. The Chesiv, the pasuk says, "Vayemer elecha," Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Eibush, "After Chet Ha'egel, in ein panecha helcha v'goymer." If Hashem Himself was not going to go in front of Yidden, then we don't want a malach, even malach matat, to go in front of the Yidden. A heretic said to Rabbi Shmuel Bar Rabbi Yossi, the pasuk says, "V'Hashem himtir." Hashem brought a fire, and he brought and Stayman Amayre Gofris ve'eish me'eis Hashem. And then it says again in the end of the pasuk me'eis Hashem. So why does it say Hashem again me'eis Hashem? Me'itoi mi'bayle. Should have said, it already said in the beginning of the pasuk of Hashem him. Should have said me'itoi from him. Amaleyahu kaivis. So there was this launderer that said, Shafkei, leave this heretic. Anom adranale. I'll answer him. The pasuk says Vayemel lemach lenoshav Odav etzila shman kaili. So Lemech says to his wives, Adon Atil, listen to my voice. Nishei Lemech. And these were the wives of Lemech. So it says, Nishei Lemech, Noshai miboyele. It should have said, my wife. So they already said in the beginning that Lemech spoke to his wife. This is the way the pasuk speaks. It starts off saying, and Lemech speaks to his wives, and it finishes off again, Nishei Lemech. So too over here, the pasuk speaks this way. So Rabbi Yechanan, not Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbi Shmuel, but Rabbi Yosi asked this launderer, how did you know how to give this answer? So he said, Mi pirket Rab Meir Shmieli. I heard this from the drasha of Rab Meir. And from Rab Meir, I learned how to answer this. Okay, the Gemara is going to bring me to get to Rab Meir. The Mishalim of Rab Meir, we'll see him at Hashem.